Now my title this morning is Theocratic Backdrop of Political Neutrality. This is a biblical inquiry. I will try to unpack what lies behind this title so that we will all move together as I will be presenting. The term theocratic is derived from theocracy, which is also derived from two Greek words, theos, which means God, and krateo, which means to rule. Therefore, what it simply means when we are talking of theocracy or theocratic, we are talking something that is to do with the rule of God. The rule of God. And in terms of issues of politics, theocracy is a form of government or governance in which a deity is the source from which all authority derives. Therefore, when we are talking of a theocratic backdrop of political neutrality, we are saying as long as God is in control, or as long as God is still ruling, our contribution as human beings determine the movement or the direction of governance is so minimum or so little, or we have nothing to contribute much, as it were. God is the one who rules and is in control, and he dictates what should be done and what happens. And for that reason, our duty is to remain politically neutral, or to be apolitical. Therefore, there are two terms or phrases which I also desire to unpack. Political activism, in this study, refers to the involvement of the church in engaging members, mobilizing them to participate actively in political processes. It entails sourcing and distributing information with regard to candidates that will be vying for political positions. On the other side, political neutrality refers to a passive response to political issues, with the belief that God is in control, even if he permits cruel people to govern his people. Therefore, God's control as far as leading and directing politics is not measured, or is not only appreciated when good people are in power. Even if they are cruel people who are in power, the church must understand God is still in control. And this assumption is based on biblical principles, which I'll unpack as I'll be moving, or as we'll be moving together. The abstract of this presentation presupposes that political activism is a betrayal of faith in God, also a challenge against his sovereignty. Such betrayal is usually caused by loss of trust in him, which means those who trust that God is in control, they have nothing to lose and they have nothing to gain and to contribute as far as political activism is concerned. Political activism results in anger against God, hatred against fellow beings, loss of religious identity, frustration and loss of the sense of mission. In other words, many times when people become politically active in such to participate and to direct and to control, or somehow to contribute, as it were, toward the direction of political activities, in most cases people are frustrated because of the outcome. When the people whom they will not be anticipating to get power, they eventually get it, against their wish or against their will. As a result, we become frustrated. And to heal from such kind of frustration, it will take ages, or sometimes it will never be. Another thing is also hatred against fellow beings, who, in this regard, may be on the opposite side, or will be supporting or preferring candidates not of our own preference. As a result, it we lose, or if you lose, you end up hating those who were against or who were on the other side. And at the same time, we also lose our religious identity, which means the more we become politically active, we lose our sense of mission. As a result, we will lose our identity. And also, we lose the sense of mission. If the church becomes or gets entangled in the issues of politics, it loses its identity and also loyal to God, and their enemies gain mileage. A cause of concern. The question of whether the church should be politically active or not, it is not a new question, or it is not a new concern. In other words, this has been handled, or it has been attended to, or people have been working on it, and they've been wrestling with it for ages. Politicians, sociologists, historicists have been wrestling with this question or concern, and for ages it has been an issue to discuss. When we are looking at this thing, this paper argues on a biblical basis in favor of political neutrality. Things that need to be taken into consideration includes, but not limited to, the following. Let's look at the gains vis-a-vis or versus the losses. Let's consider issues of internal factors that may determine our potential or our anticipation to succeed or to lose. Then also there are external factors to be taken into consideration when we are looking at issues of politics in Africa. Then also biblical factors. For the internal factors, we are looking at things that are resident or that are within our African context that determine our success or our failure to lose or to gain as far as political activism is concerned. External factors, as it were, or they have to do with the international community as they are looking on the continent of Africa. Because politics, even if we do them in Africa or in the context of Africa, we do not exist in isolation. The international community has a lot to contribute toward our towards dynamics of politics in Africa. Let's look at the gains and also losses. We have our identity to protect. We have our relationships to protect. We have our unity to protect. We have our mission to pursue. We have our resources to protect. The more we indulge or engage in political activism, all these gains that we have already gained, we are vulnerable to lose them. Our chances to lose all these gains are high as long as, or the more we participate actively in issues of politics. Because politics will drain our resources and our unity will eventually be compromised, mission, relationships, and our sense of identity. The church saves itself from untold frustration and irreparable divisions and also apostasy. If we become politically active as a church, at the end of it, chances are of frustration are very high and also irreparable divisions. To solve those divisions or gaps, it will be very difficult at the end. Therefore, we are better off as a church to remain apolitical or politically neutral, regardless of the rough climate in the world of politics on the continent. God is the only one who is able to address African political dynamics, because he is not limited as we are. Let's consider, or let's look at internal factors that may threaten or that may hinder our success as far as political activism is concerned. The reason why we are talking and why we are advocating for political neutrality is, in Africa, we are notoriously religious, according to Mbiti. And because of this factor, or this fact, our chances of making it by indulging actively in politics are so minimum because of this factor. Africans believe in times of crisis, God or the gods is there to intervene, to help, or to rescue in times of crisis. Our enemies or politicians, they understand this factor much better. Therefore, when you see them seeking to engage political church institutions for political reasons, they know very well that you identify power and you identify everything in terms of God's guidance. And for that reason, they take advantage of Africans, particularly because of this factor of notorious religiousness. At the same time, you will notice and you also realize colonizers or imperialists, they took advantage of this factor. They realized it's better and it's easier to colonize Africans by using missionaries than the gun. And as a result, they gained the whole continent by using churches. Therefore, the more the churches indulge in politics or become actively involved in politics, we are following those that or those that have already gained a long mileage. For us, we'll be just following. And as a result, we will not gain much by joining them, by becoming politically active. The church in Africa is politically divided. What do I mean by this one? I mean, whatever we do in terms of governance, church governance, we discuss and we settle and we administer our governance as a church on the basis of cultural, tribal, language differences that we have. We talk of quotas. Is this people group or are these people group represented within the administrative circle that we are talking of electing people? Talk of sessions, talk of electing people to office. We talk of representation of people groups. And because of that reason, that shows us we are politically divided. As long as some people are not represented, things are not done well. We don't talk of competence or the task before us to be done or to be accomplished, but we talk of representation of people groups on the basis of language, on the basis of tribes, on the basis of backgrounds, on the basis of status and so on and so forth, rather than talking and discussing about the task before us that need to be accomplished. And for that reason, for us to indulge in political activism, this will leave us compromising so much of our mission than gaining anything. We have cultural factors that need also to be taken into consideration with regard to power dynamics, as Dr. Mzengi was discussing or was sharing and presenting yesterday. In Africa, don't just talk of being politically active, therefore you are politically correct, therefore what you are vying for and expecting will come out to be true. Even if you are correct, it's not only about being politically correct and being politically active and whatever, but otherwise there are many cultural issues that lies behind what we see on the face. Strong temptation to individualism. This is manifested by way of greediness to power. Each one, whatever we gains in terms of power, in terms of anything, we are too greedy. And for that reason, whoever gets into power will not want to relinquish it. At the end, by being politically active, that does not entail us we will gain what we look for or what we desire. And belief among the educated elite. This implies that more people become educated, the less trust they invest in God. They think they will gain much by being politically active because of their intellectual intelligence. They anticipate to gain much or to make a difference. And yet, God must be trusted, that our well-being and our future is smart, or they are secure in him and by him and through him alone. To give an example to this one, you will notice that in Egypt, while God's children were in Egypt long back, the mission of God in Egypt was delayed or was affected by Moses' political activism. After spending 40 years under training, Ellen White says, chapter 21 of the book, Patriarchs and Prophets, she says, angels would always communicate to him that God has chosen you aside to make a difference and to deliver God's people. After spending 40 years of training to become a pharaoh, in him and by himself, he thought, because of what he has gained from the 40 years of training, therefore, he is now qualified to assume the office. Because of that, he became too much active by killing an Egyptian to rescue the Israelites. And what happened? Eventually, he realized, oh, this thing is known, and he went, or he ran for political asylum. 40 years he had to spend away from home. And because of that reason, God's mission of delivering God's children from bondage was delayed by 40 years, just because one person thought to himself, he is now qualified to become politically active and therefore to rescue God's children from bondage. And as a result, Ellen White says, God's mission to deliver God's children from bondage was delayed for 40 years. And the issue also, just to check on the issue of dividedness, point number 2, you will also notice Moses at some point, when he tried to rescue his own brother from the Egyptian cruelty, he only came to realize just probably the day after trying to rescue his own, but only to be told, brother, you are going too far. And only to realize, instead of this guy or his own brother to be on his side, he came to realize this one can also be a sellout, or rather to betray me. That's why he had to run away. Now, on the issue of democracy, in Africa, there's no democracy. Political activism can only work well when the political landscape is filled with democracy, or it's democratic. But in Africa, there's no democracy. Therefore, you will not accomplish much by being politically active. There is high levels of professional jealousy in Africa. Because of this, the church will not gain much by way of becoming politically active. How do we know, or how do we express this professional jealousy? See, when we are nearing church elections, the way we manifest political jealousy to each other shows very well that if we would go the direction of politics, as it were, in the governance of the country, there will be more bloodshed, or we will lose more than gain because of that kind of jealousy. The other issue is poverty. There is too much poverty in Africa, but if we are to indulge in African politics, if we are to become politically active, we will lose much again, because sometimes our members are used as instruments for political mileage. Why? Because they are promised some things and they believe. At the end, again, they will lose much because some of these promised things are not fulfilled. External factors, you talk of cruel foreign powers. The powers that are within the international community, when they are looking at Africa, they look at Africa as a source of their wealth or resources. So they even sponsor war on the continent of Africa to gain mileage. So for that reason, if you become politically active, the kind of people you will be working with But the kind of people who are interested in this are too many. Not only those who are within the context of Africa, but we are talking of also external powers. There's the issue of unresolved issues with the former colonial masters, the church. Also the issue of identity. Our American identity on the continent is not so much to our benefit, but it is more on the losing side, because whenever we try by all means as a church to engage ourselves politically in issues of politics, the context of Africa will identify you with where you are coming from. Okay, these are the Americans because of our headquarters in America. Therefore, we will not do much by engaging ourselves into politics. Some historical considerations. The same vessel that brought missionaries to Africa is the same vessel that brought mercenaries too. Therefore, people are skeptical when they are looking at churches becoming involved in politics, because they remember what transpired during the time of colonialism. Theocratic basis for political neutrality. The biblical concept of God as the basis for political neutrality is the one that we are presenting here. Therefore, an understanding of who God is and how he relates to humanity may help us to understand and to appreciate political neutrality above all other reasons that we may present. Things that we may need to consider is God's creatorship, God's sovereignty, God's omniscience, God's salvific role, God's role in eschatology. Each of these factors clearly distinguish God's supreme authority over the affairs of this world. How about issues of creatorship? Questions of origin. Creatorship addresses questions of origin. The issue of origin is a crucial issue in terms of African politics. People are reminded where they came from. As long as you believe that God created us or created you, there is no reason to doubt of his governance of this world. It is God who created this world or who brought it into existence. Therefore, allow him to govern that which he created. Because God created this world, he has full prerogative to govern it. We were not there and we didn't contribute anything as far as the creation of this world is concerned. Therefore, we have nothing to contribute as far as its governance is concerned. God's sovereignty, God alone wields ultimate power that resides in him. That means he is the only one who can participate in politics and the governance without seeking majority vote by way of campaigning. Whereas most politicians seek political positions for the sake of acquiring material wealth. God is self-existent. Therefore, when he plays politics, he is not playing politics for the sake of gaining anything. Because in him, he exists by himself, or for himself. He doesn't need anything from anyone for him to exist. Therefore, he has nothing to lose, he has nothing to gain. Otherwise, he is the owner of everything. My time is running out. God's sovereignty. You will notice that God is non-militant for material or for financial gains. He is self-existent, as we have already noticed. God is omniscient. He is all-knowing. He is able to declare the end from the beginning. He is able to change times, seasons, removing kings and raise up kings, setting up thrones, and so on and so forth. Based on his foreknowledge, God is able to draw a complete historical timeline of this world from the beginning to the end. If you check Daniel chapter 2, chapter 7, chapter 8, chapter 11, chapter 12, and the whole book of Revelation, God has already set in place where this world is coming from and where it is going to, how it is going to end. In the process of the historical timeline, he punctuates it with events, places, even persecutions of God's people. God is aware when the persecution is done. God is aware when people are mishandled. But God is aware when anything that disturbs peace is happening. Therefore, we have nothing to contribute as far as the world of politics is concerned. It's not so much that we need to do God's, we need to help God by becoming politically active to change things. We change nothing because God is in control and he has already predetermined how things are going to be, even the death and the martyrdom of his children. God is aware of that. God is also the only true savior. One of the key truths of politics in Africa is the issue of liberation of people from bondage. A point of reference in African politics is, don't forget where we came from. We liberated you. And for that reason, politicians take advantage of that one. But people and also the church, we need to remember who is our true emancipator. God is our only true liberator. Once he may use people as agents in the process, but behind them there is God's power. Therefore, to work with politics, with politicians, or to indulge actively in politics, we are saying, or we are communicating, we need the people to liberate us. And yet, that is contrary to what God sets forward in his word. If the church believes that God is the creator of this world and that he is the savior of this world, it should also trust him for the governance of this world. Now, considering these factors so far, the world has no problem and the church has no problem to admit that God is the creator. The church and the world has no problem to admit that God is the savior. But the major reason or the major question is on the issue of governance. They want to participate in the governance, both of the world and the church. Therefore, political activism in the church and in the world is based on the assumption that we need to help God to put the church in place and to put the world in place. And yet we did not help him to put the world in place as far as creation is concerned. And yet we have nothing to help God as far as the eschatology or the end of this world is concerned. Now, let's draw some biblical lessons for political neutrality. In heaven, Lucifer was the first creature to become a political activist. He doubted the governance of God, and eventually he lost the battle. After he had become a political activist, he mobilized people, and he garnered a good number of angels. At the end, he lost it. In Egypt, the same thing happened. Moses in Egypt, he also repeated the same mistake, and as a result, mission was delayed. Freedom of God's children was delayed for 40 years. If you read Exodus chapter 3, verse 6 to 10, it was God who played an active role or a key role to redeem his people from bondage. It was God who saw the oppression of his people. It was God who heard their cry. It was God who knew their sorrows. It was God who came down to deliver them out of bondage. It was God who brought them from Egypt to a good land. It was God who elected Moses, although Moses ended up becoming biased or assumed wrong understanding that he is the emancipator of God's children. As a result, he did not even enter the promised land. Some biblical lessons. God permitted Babylonian exile for 70 years of God's children with the good intentions. If you read Jeremiah chapter 29, verse 11, God tells them, you are still in bondage for 70 years. Until that is accomplished, don't worry, remain there. And also, this is for good intentions. This was for good intentions. Christ was born when the Romans were in power. Jews erroneously thought that Christ's mission involved political activism sought to overthrow the Roman government. They were shocked to see him too passive even after John was beheaded. In other words, if political activism was necessary or was relevant, Christ himself was supposed to be politically active, or the church during that time was supposed to react after the beheading of John. But Christ remained passive. The church remained passive. Christ himself even also was beheaded. And the church remained passive again. When they assumed, or when they thought to become politically active at some stage, you realize they lost much. Submission to God's governance is not on conditional basis that they are good people who are leading, even if they are corrupt people leading, God is still in control. Even if they are cruel people in the leading of the governance of the world or of the nation, God is still in control. There's no governing authority that exists without being appointed by God. That's Romans chapter 13, verse 1. Whoever resists the authority whoever resists the authority of the governance or doubts their governance because of cruelty resists the ordinance of God. Taxes must be paid, customs, fear, and everything must be rendered to those who deserve them. Finally, in the early church, persecution of the church reigned terror, but no one ever, the church did not participate in political activism. Stephen was martyred in the presence of Paul. John was persecuted and banished on the Patmos. In the early church, what persecution failed to accomplish towards distorting Christianity, political activism of the church succeeded. In other words, if we are to become politically active, the mission of the church and the identity of the church will become distorted. Conclusion: the political climate in Africa is too rough for the church to engage itself in political activism. To do so, it is futile for the church's identity and mission. Political neutrality is a biblical basis and firmly anchored in the concept of God, who He is and how He relates with His creation to determine how we respond to governance issues. Since God created, it is also Him that must be trusted to dictate the governance of this world. His sovereignty and omniscience are the best arguments in favor for political neutrality. By this is my presentation, and my understanding that I understand, or that I presume, may help us to understand dynamics of politics in Africa. May God bless us.
Thank you very much for your presentation. We have